Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 15 of The Mountains We Climb. In each of these episodes, we're going to be diving into the mind of someone who has overcome significant challenge and adversity in their life so that we, as the listeners, can see what is really possible and what it really takes. I'm your host, Jordan Kilpatrick-Smith, and today we're going to be exploring Rashteen's journey from scardom to stardom. Quick reminder that each episode is done live, so that if you'd like to come and ask your own questions and be a part of our discussion, you can join us on YouTube and Facebook every Saturday, 10 a.m. Eastern. Rashteen, thank you so much for being here with me today.
Happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. So where does your story start?
I guess it stems from childhood, most definitely. I think at a very young age, I was learning a lot about kind of my parents and how they were kind of came up and kind of the, I guess, negative paths specifically my dad was taking. To go more into detail with that, I guess he essentially got into Canada, had nothing going for him, was essentially just a refugee and was working delivery driver jobs, kind of trying to make ends meet before he decided he wanted to go back to university. After he graduated, he got an incredible job in Afghanistan. But I guess with all the success, he started seeing a mistress. And then when he started seeing the mistress, that carried on for several years where the family had no idea what was going on. He was going away for severely longer than usual. And then the rest of my family ended up finding out, but I was far too young. So they kind of kept it a secret from me. But I saw different signs of it from a very young age. Like my mom would complain about, in our language, the word faisha means, I cannot say it's very inappropriate, but
that's okay. A heads up for anyone who's got children around. Now's a good time to mute it. Feel free to.
It pretty much means whore in my language. And I was hearing different things, and my sisters were constantly getting into arguments with my dad, like close to fist fights. But every time I would be around playing with an action figure, they would all become silent and not say anything around me. So that went on for several years. And then I'd say when I was about 15, I was going through a lot of, I had my first panic attack, my first very bad panic attack, because throughout childhood I just had anxiety. But I had my first very bad panic attack, and my dad had flown home and said, I would love to take you on a trip with me. We'll go on a cruise, we'll distract you. I said, sure. I haven't seen you in quite some time. I think that would be a lot of fun. And
so what happened in the middle there? So your dad was seeing a mistress. As a child, you knew something was going on, but it was kind of hush-hush around you. And then you just mentioned that he came back and you hadn't seen him in a long time. What happened in that gap there?
He came back for a couple weeks here and there throughout the past few years there, but I never really heard much from him. I just kind of would see an email from him pop up every once in a while saying, I sent your mom some money. How's school? Very much
in Afghanistan. Is that right?
He was in Afghanistan.
Okay.
Yeah, he was essentially a big deal. He worked very hard, got a good job once he finished at McMaster, and his life kind of took a 360 where he was essentially one of the biggest things in the country. He had multiple things going for him. He was the president of health and education out there, so he had really made a living for himself.
Yeah.
So, yes, all that was happening. He was continuously seeing the mistress, working his job, traveling all over the world, not really telling us, what was happening, what he was experiencing, all the cool stuff he got to saw. He was very much at his own kind of he beat at his own drum type of thing. So essentially, I had that panic attack, and it was my first time actually seeing him for, I guess, more than 24 hours, because he would usually come home, say hi, and then go out. So he would be in the city, be around us, but he would go see friends and family and go to the bar and stuff. So I never actually got the experience to hang out with him. So he says, we're going to go on a cruise. So we get to Lester B. Pearson Airport, and there is a Afghani family. He says, I work with them. They're a bunch of great people. They're going to be joining us. Right off the bat, he kind of made it clear that it would just be us going. So that was very much a disappointment. But they seemed nice, and I wanted to be polite because I don't think it's completely in my nature just to be negative right off the bat. I wanted to be kind of open and give them a chance. We get to Orlando, we get on the cruise, and we were spending every waking second with them. Like, we went ski doing with them, we went to every type of exertion you can think of. We had lots of fun, but I was so confused, like, because I was not being kind of explained who this family was.
Right.
And then the last night we were on the cruise, I kind of looked over my shoulder, and my dad was holding hands with this woman, and I was so confused because I was like, why are they holding hands? Like, and then my dad has told me his whole life he doesn't like the nightlife activities. He'd rather just sit at a bar with some buddies. But this lady would say, "Oh, me and your dad, we're gonna go to the club tonight. We're gonna get drunk and then do all sorts of substances." And it was such a big shock to me. Because I would never kind of expect my dad to be like that. He was more of like the quiet bar guy, went home, did some pharmaceuticals, and went to bed. So we get off the cruise, and I thought that we were just going home. And he says, "Oh, no, we're going to be going to Disneyland or Disney World or whatever it's called at this hotel." And I had a very bad panic attack, and I was throwing up for a couple hours, like nonstop throwing up. And he says, "Oh, I'm going to go out for dinner with her." And I said, "Oh, I'm your son. Like, you're not going to sit with me and while I'm kind of in agony here?" And he said, "No." He said, "I'm going to go out." So I called my mom, and I said, I was telling her how I was having a panic attack, and she was calming me down. And I said, "Oh, who is this lady?" And I mentioned her name, and she immediately broke down and said, that's your father's mistress. You should ask her about it, or ask him about it." So he comes back about 2 hours later, pretty hammered. He's been drinking. He's intoxicated for sure. He comes in and he sits on the bed, and I say, "Tell me about this woman. Tell me about her. I want to know everything. Let's hear it." And he says, "Oh, for the past 25 years." So my mom and my dad have been married at that point for about 30 years. He says, "For the past 25 years, I've been seeing this woman." I said, "Can you go more into detail? Because that's a very nonchalant way of saying it. Can you tell me exactly what you mean by that?" Because seeing could just be like, "Oh, we're going on a coffee, we're friends," or there's so many different meanings to that terminology. So I said, "Can you go more into detail?" And he says, "Oh, I've been having an affair." And immediately I felt my anxiety, my panic attack symptoms kind of disappear, and I developed severe anger. So I ended up damaging the whole hotel room and shoving my dad, and I was at the point of essentially killing him. I was so upset because I'm a mama's boy at heart, based on only being with my mom my whole life. So I'm pro-mom consistently. So I was very close, and something went off in my head, and I said, "I can't do this. I don't want to have this reputation of killing my dad." So I ended up getting all my bags and walking around Florida crying, having a mixture of anger, panic attacks throughout the night, calling my mom, my sisters, and I don't even know where I am. I'm just walking downtown Florida. I have no idea. Yeah, at 15, I have no idea where I am. And my sister is saying, "Oh, wait right there. Like, I'm gonna fly down and I'm gonna come get you." And I said, "Well, there's no point. My flight's at like 6:30 in the morning." It was at this point, I think it was like 2 a.m. So I found a cab, or I think it was a cab. This part gets kind of blurry for me because I was so emotional. But I ended up at the airport. I believe it was a cab. I could have walked at this point. I have no idea. I was walking all night. And I get to the airport, and I'm waiting at my terminal, and I remember my dad comes and tries to talk to me, and he says, "Oh, this is my real wife. Your mom's not my real wife. She's a cancer to me." And I just told him to shut the F up. And there was another lady that was in the area in our terminal, and she was looking at me, giving me these dirty looks, like. And then she called me crazy and said that she said something along the lines that I'm some sort of schizo, something along the lines of that. And I remember I ended up yelling at her, and I looked like the crazy guy. Definitely at that
Right.
crazy guy at the airport at 6 a.m. that's
Yeah.
yelling at everyone. And we're talking, and he says, "Oh, I'm gonna go back to Afghanistan with her. I'm gonna get on a flight with them." So it's like he put me through all this, and then all of a sudden he's like, "Oh, I'm gonna go back with her. You can go alone." So I said, if I make it into music and I gain success and I gain stardom and I create my own fame and my own destiny and my own success, I don't want you a part of it. So anyone watching, don't do this to your parent, but I spat in his face and I got on the flight. Didn't see him for a couple of years, but when I got home, I made it a mission to release a song every week from the most garbage setup I had in my living room at my mom's house with a USB microphone that my mom bought me when I was very young. And I made it a certain thing. I said, I got a vision and a mission board. And I said, I'm going to put out a song every week. I'm going to generate views. I'm going to generate success. I'm going to start sneaking my way into shows. And at that time, I was already sneaking my way into shows. I was 13, 14, sneaking into showcases and kind of open mic talent shows. But I said, I'm going to take it to a more bigger level. I'm going to lie about my age and get into these bigger hip hop shows and these bigger concerts that they had going on in Toronto.
Yeah. So can I just pop in for a moment there?
Sure.
What age did you get into music?
I was very young. I was around 6 or 7 years old when I discovered that I liked music. I always liked music from what my mom was saying. She had this little radio for me that I have here, and she would play a mixture of Hindi songs to Lebanese music to these ballads when I was just in my crib as a baby, as an infant. So I'd say 6 or 7 was when I discovered that I loved music, and then my mom got me into Hindi lessons. It was, I believe, a Sikh or a Punjabi woman, I believe. I don't entirely remember. Very nice woman, though. She was charging very high for her hourly rates to teach vocal lessons. And my mom convinced her to lower the price down, and I started taking lessons with her for a couple of years where I learned kind of, you probably see it all over social media where it's like it's pretty much just vowel singing. So I was doing that for a few years, and then I started seeing a teacher that is now on Broadway now. So I was garnishing experience throughout the years into singing. I didn't start making music till about 12. I was always writing, but 12 was when my mom bought me this USB microphone from the dollar store. I was putting up Katy Perry covers on YouTube. Yeah, so I definitely 7 was when I started, and then 12 was when I started recording and trying to make covers. And then
So when we started the story about your dad, and at this point when you're 15, at this point you had been already on your way to producing music and had decided for yourself, this is the path that I want to live. Is that right?
Absolutely. It was definitely the kickstart to take it more serious.
Yeah.
I think I always took it serious. I always had more of a hobby approach to it. But at this point, it was this or die. This was the sink or swim moment. So
yeah. And so what was it that changed for you in your mind after this experience with your dad that really caused that transition into the sink or swim?
When I saw that, I felt like nothing was promised. I saw that even in family relationships, nothing is really sincere. There's a lot of backstabbing and just, the fact that for several years you're kind of convinced that you fall in love with someone and you get married and you have kids and you live happily ever after. And when I found out that was complete BS, it very much devastated me because I still try to convince myself to this day that I'm gonna be happy when I get married and I'm gonna have children. But when I found out that wasn't the case, that you can be full and still be unhappy and still feel the need to have an affair, that's when I was like, I don't want to be that person. I don't want to be the person that gives up, essentially. Music was kind of like my own relationship, I guess you could say, that I didn't want to give up on.
Yeah, I hear you. And so you developed this motivation, right? It was like, I am going to succeed at this for me. This is going to be the thing that makes me happy. the thing that fulfills me. Am I understanding that right?
Absolutely.
Cool. And so, sorry, continue where you had left off there. You started to go to more shows. You said, I'm going to put out a song every single week.
So I said I was going to put out a song every week, and I wanted to do what I wanted to do. I very much love singing. I love ballads, but I also love rap music as well. That was something that kind of I developed later in life, but it was also a very big passion for me in my writing and stuff like that. So I wanted to put out different types of songs every week, which is ironically what we'll get into later is what I'm starting to do now. But I was putting out an R&B song one week, and then the next week I was putting out a pop song, and the next week I was putting out an old school rap song. And when I started doing it, the first 3 months, I was barely hitting 60 views on each song, and I was so disappointed. And I said, I have to think out of the box here. I got to do something bigger. So I had a friend that had a white cat, a white Persian cat, and I had taken a picture with the cat, and it was a goofy face. It was me doing like,
Yeah.
and I was doing the cat. And then I had all my social media handles and my SoundCloud handle where I was posting at the time. And I would throw those business cards around everywhere I went. If I would go into a McDonald's or Tim Hortons, I would hand it out to any high school kids or adults that were there. I was very nervous, but I would try my best. And most of the time it was just me handing the card and not saying anything.
So you just walked up to people, smiled, and were like, here you go?
Exactly. People were into it. Like, they're actually accepting the card. When they would see the photo, they thought I was a comedian,
right,
at first. And then they would look at my social media and they would say, oh, he's a musician. And then that generated kind of people saying, oh, you should do skits. You should do more comedy stuff. But I was so nervous and trying to get out of my shell. All I had in my mindset was making music. And then that was about kind of a month after I had been home. So the full month I was putting out a single. I was trying to generate promotion and advertisement. And then I did this showcase in Toronto. It was, I believe it's called Talent Nation, but I believe they switched the name of it now. But it's a very popular showcase, a very big turnout. There's a lot of big executives and producers and different people in the industry that come out to this and kind of scout talent. And I didn't make it at first. You have to do like an audition process. I didn't make it. And they emailed me back and said, oh, we want to put you into this runner-up position where you kind of go head-to-head with another talent and showcase your best skills, and then we kind of go from there and choose who we like better. So I said, all right, I take the challenge, and I prepared myself for, I believe, 2 weeks. I was rehearsing every day in my basement, trying to figure out if I was going to do a cover, if I was going to do an original, and then I decided that I wanted to do an Ed Sheeran song. I did Lego House, and then I did a rap verse at the end. And I had a friend of mine kind of remix the beat, the melody, and then kind of add like a drum pattern at the end because it's very slow. And I did it, and I didn't think I was very good, but a lot of people said I had potential, and I didn't end up getting through. The other girl, who's a fantastic singer, she ended up getting through. And there was a gentleman that started kind of following me, and it was making me quite uncomfortable.
Like physically following you?
Yeah, like he would come see me at other kind of open mics I did or any other show that I got on, like bigger hip hop shows that I would lie about my age, and they would let me perform like a 5-minute set. And he just kept following me and just looking at me, and I would see him everywhere, even when and I knew he was from Toronto, but even when I would be in Burlington at a grocery store in my hometown, I would see him. And eventually I did a show, and it was my first time experiencing kind of negativity, like to an extreme level. I had beer bottles thrown at me and stuff like that at this show in Etobicoke. Very, very rough crowd. And I was so disappointed, and I was crying outside by myself because I was coming to these shows all alone. And
how old were you at this point, Rashteen?
I was still 15. My birthday was a few months away, turning 16. And he comes up to me, this gentleman, and he says, oh, I have a label called The Fifth, and we would love to discuss further with you. I thought that this guy was going to murder me right away. I thought he was going to assassinate me or something, because they're just a random guy that was coming to shows in sweatpants, like a tracksuit, not professional at all. And he said, oh, like, you know, this is my girlfriend. He introduced me to his girlfriend. He said, she's my photographer, videographer for the company. We would love to have you come to our studio and do a photo shoot. Immediately I was like, they're going to get me into like porn or human trafficking or something. Like something bad is going to happen. But I took a chance. I took the subway, got to his house, to his apartment, and it was a very dangerous area in Steeles. And it was not at all a safe environment, but I took a chance. I went up these stairs, and he had a decent setup. Like there was a green screen, there was expensive equipment, and he said, we took photos, they came out amazing, and he was telling me how he actually discovered Tory Lanez, who is a very like mainstream A-list artist right now. But when Tory Lanez was around my age, he discovered him. He said that he showed him the road, took him to Europe and different parts of the world, taught him how to be confident, taught him how to perform, gave him bigger and better opportunities. But then he would always say like, oh, Tory changed. I don't talk to the guy. He's a scumbag. So these photos happened. We had a great conversation. I really liked the guy. He kind of wooed me over. I thought he was very trustworthy and had a lot of experience. I thought he could take me to a place that I had never been before. He says, oh, like I do showcases once a month at a place called Silver Dollar Room, which is now closed down. But he said, I always do shows once a month there. I pack the house. I have a whole crowd come out. Producers are there, videographers are there, photographers are there. They're all doing work, taking videos, taking photos. And I'd love for you to be a part of it. And I said, all right, sounds great. And he said, oh yeah, and your set's going to be 20 minutes. And at that point, I had never done a 20-minute set. I had only done 5 minutes, 4 minutes, 3 minutes.
So like one or two songs at a time.
Exactly. And I didn't even think I had enough material. And then I ended up having to like go. I went home and I wrote a bunch of songs to YouTube beats in like 5 minutes, 5 or 6 of them. And then I ended up adding songs to my set because I didn't have enough that I was happy with. And then I did the show and it went great. It was probably the happiest kind of event that I've had where I felt a lot of love, felt a lot of it.
So I just want to pause because there's something I'm really curious about there. When you came back, so we're looking at like, early 15th year, how many times would you say you wanted to quit? Like you mentioned, I wasn't happy with the results that I was getting. And you mentioned that along the way, like there had been this time where people were throwing beer bottles at you, you went outside, you were crying. How many times along the way did you feel like quitting or like a failure or that it just wasn't possible for you?
Every time. There's not one circumstance where I didn't feel like I was negative on myself. I think every moment, even when I was writing a song, when I was recording a song at my house, to when I did a show, to when people gave me backlash, comments on the internet, I constantly felt like I wanted to quit. I constantly felt bombarded and then felt like I wasn't worth it, which are completely all normal feelings, but I didn't understand it at the time. I took it to such an extreme level. I'm very much like, from our personal lives, I'm very much a perfectionist. I overthink, overanalyze everything. So nonstop. But the only thing that was keeping me alive was wanting to beat my dad into something, wanting to stick to something and not give up on something. So that was the only thing that was keeping me going. But every second I constantly had negative after negative after negative. But I kept trying to block it out, which I think is the most important thing. And in that moment, in your come up, I think it's crucial to block it out. And then once you start to garner, then you start to manage it. Once you start awesome, then you start to manage it and face it. But in the beginning, it's all about you getting to a level. So you got to block everything out.
Yeah. And I think I'm really happy that you shared that, because I think that is success, right? You find a why, a drive. This is what I'm hearing you say. You found something to cling on to, and it didn't matter what was thrown at you because you had that why. This is the reason I am doing this, and every failure, I'm going to keep going.
Absolutely. You got it.
And then it leads up to this point where you had a 20-minute show where you got a lot of love and positivity, right?
It worked out. And I think the universe, I say this so many times, I've said this so many times every time we've talked privately. The universe works in the strangest ways. It give you so many negatives at back to back, to back, but then one blessing will come. And it's like, you completely forget about the negatives just because of one kind of change. So I guess I did this 20-minute set. I got a lot of love, and I ended up going outside. My Freddie, who was my manager, soon to be, had come outside with me. I have a surprise for you. And I thought, like, you know, he just wanted to go take a smoke break, or he had kind of positive words to say to me. But he had a bunch of, like, they're all local, like local hip hop music news stations. And he had a bunch of them lined up for me. And then all I remember coming out, and it was just such a monumental moment for me, because I was just getting so much attention, which is what I've wanted my whole life. Microphones in my face. Oh, and mind you, they're not like mainstream media, but it was still enough for me to wow me and say, I want this life.
Right.
They're all, how did you feel about your performance? How did you feel about this? Oh, talk about this song. And it was just like, I felt like I finally made my mark, where people were starting to notice me. And then he said, oh, like, you enjoy this. Maybe when you come back in, we'll talk about a contract. I said, okay. So I'm doing all these interviews, and I come back in, and I gave him a hug. Didn't even say anything. I gave him a hug, and I said, thank you, man. I want to sign with you. And he said, okay. And I signed the contract without even reading it, which, again, anybody watching, don't do that. Always take the contract to a lawyer. But I signed it without even thinking. And for the rest of those few months, I was sleeping on his couch. I completely moved into his studio apartment that had no AC. And I think I brought 3 or 4 shirts with me and 2 pairs of pants. Like, I very, very minimal. And we embarked on kind of the next step. How can we build on social media? How can we build an audience? How can we gain followers, gain viewers? And he had reached out to a producer in Toronto who wanted to kind of take my music to the next level. And I put out a song called Basic, and that was the game changer. That song was being played at nearly every high school party. It was hitting a different level of views online on Garter, doing SoundCloud, Facebook, and YouTube. And immediately that song opened the door for me, where I was getting into bigger shows. I was hanging out with artists that I looked up to. So at that time I was 16, and I was just on the road of getting my own apartment, buying a car. Life was going spectacular. I was very happy.
And were you still in high school?
I was doing mainly online work, and then I would come in every now and then. Like, if I had sports, like I was still committed to sports, like football and rugby. I would always show up. Even if I had to miss a practice, I would always go to a game.
Yeah.
But I would still come to school, like, in a classroom setting, like once a month, which I preferred that way. I think everyone's different, but I enjoyed more at my own pace.
Yeah. And when you started to see this success, you released Basic, it was like, okay, this is going somewhere. What changed in how you viewed you? Or did anything change?
My confidence grew. I felt more of a bigger deal. I felt like how I think how I was destined to feel. Or I was confident. I am confident, but I was developing this confidence, this belief system that I can do it. Yeah. And that anything is possible. Like, I was, when I left the flight after my dad, I was telling myself in my head, 50% of it was, you can do it, make the change, make that step. But the other 50% was, this is unrealistic. I'm young, I have no experience. I thought I was unattractive. I thought my music was not up to top tier ability. So I still had those negatives, but I was blossoming into this confidence and this belief system that I can do it. I can become successful. And that's what kind of my whole thing became about. After the song I put out called Basic, I started putting out more positive music, like that you can do anything, pretty much. Yeah. That it doesn't matter what your circumstances, you can do it. Because I was developing crazy amounts of panic attacks. I was developing a certain level of depression that I was keeping under the surface because of my dad, my family situation. And I said, screw all that. I want to become something. And it's possible, you know? Mm-hmm. So that's what kind of came about after Basic. I was putting out very positive songs. and the numbers just started growing, like substantially, to the point where Freddie and I, my manager, we didn't know how to handle it.
So what were the numbers looking like there? What was that growth like?
Like I had a video on Twitter that was hitting a couple 100,000 views. I had done a comedy video of me actually at University of Toronto, and I was in a white suit and I was wearing a toupee and I was asking really stupid questions, asking people if they knew who Scence was. That video was hitting a couple 100,000 views as well. So at that time, 100,000 views was considered like you've made it out of Canada. Now, in the year 2020, if you don't hit 1 million views, then you haven't made it. But at the time, 100,000, like we didn't know how to deal with it. My manager was getting calls saying, "Oh, we want to get him into acting classes. We want him to be an extra on the show. And then I had other offers to be a principal role. I had other offers to go to auditions. So it's just left and right. And then there was a festival in Germany that was happening that I was offered to perform at. So I was getting all these offers right off the bat. And at the time, I still didn't have like the speaking ability. That was one thing I lacked on. I couldn't face someone in an interview setting or outside of a venue and talk to people. I had a lot of the, it's nice to meet you. I was very shy, and probably you wouldn't even believe it, because when we met, I was, "Oh, hey, how's it going, man?" Yeah. He booked a flight out to Florida, and he said, "Oh, like he would give me this was a kind of a lesson he taught me, which I'll always hold dear, no matter what negatives we have between us." We went out to Florida. He gave me a blank CD that had no sleeve on it, no cover. It was literally just like half the plastic was off, and it was just a blank disc, and on the back supported the cover of the case. And he would say, "Oh, go to this crowd of people and talk about your mixtape coming out." Was it a disaster the first few times? I would say, "Oh, my name's Scence, and this is my CD." And I would stand there quiet, silent. And people would say like, "Oh, does this kid have problems? Like, what's wrong with this guy?" and my manager had taught me. So he would take me on right next to him, right beside him, and he would go up to people, groups of people, and say, "Oh, this is my CD. I'm a young artist from Toronto. I would love for you to take a listen to it." And then he would have me say the same thing, Scence, but make it into your own version. So then I started developing abilities where I was going up to crowds of people and making them laugh. And then I'd making a gigantic conversation out of it. And then I would end up actually giving them the blank disc, thinking I had music on it when I didn't. So I started developing all these great skills. And then we got more deep into the social media marketing, which he helped me develop skills with that as well, how to build a social media, how to build a following. So everything was kind of going into the right direction. And every time we would fly back to Toronto, like everything was just growing at such a substantial rate. I was doing a show, like 3-4 shows a week. I was going on tours. I was acting. I was dabbling into stand-up comedy. Like I was doing everything. And throughout my life, I didn't even think I was funny. So I was learning so many things about myself in the process that I had the ability to speak to people, and I had the ability to make people laugh just on the spot. I didn't have to write things out. It was very much a momentum thing where I could just say something on the fly. I was doing rap battles where I would go to an event at a bar and I would freestyle and make fun of the other person. I was juggling so many different things. So that lasted for about 2 years, where I was just nonstop on the go. And I was still, I don't know how I was doing it, but I was still completing online school for high school. Like I was still passing everything and getting through high school, making appearances at my school every now and then, feeling like I was a bigger deal. I'd walk into my school, everybody knew who I was. Right. Compared to when I left, like when I was not signed, nobody knew who I was. So everything was definitely growing. And I had a dog, like I had a car, I had an apartment, and this was all 16, 17 onwards. And then I guess this is where it takes the next stage in the story. It was a few months before my 18th birthday, and I got gotten booked for a show in New York City. So there was an artist in New York who had just become Logic's artist. Logic has signed him to Def Jam, I believe, or a big label in the States. And he posted something on Instagram where he said, "Oh, I'm doing a big show at Webster Hall in New York City." And Webster Hall is a beautiful venue in New York. It was something I dreamed about, being able to perform there. Big stage, big lights, long stage hall for fans, and it was brilliant. And I had gotten everyone I know on my social media. I'm talking thousands of people. I sparked some sort of engagement for people to tag my name in this comment section. And he had privately direct messaged me on Instagram and said, "You won by a landslide. You're booked.
Wow.
You're on the show. Can we talk to your management?" So I gave them my manager's number. They had talked about my manager had talked about what I wanted. That at the time I was very, very, I guess, bougie. I wanted like a sandwich tray. I wanted like a tray of cheese, a bottle of Chardonnay. And like I was very, very specific to what I wanted. And to anyone underage, don't drink. But I was very, very specific to what I wanted. And he did not. My manager didn't kind of run everything by me. What was going to go down in New York, like what I would be receiving. We were under the impression that we were going to get one hotel room with 2 bedrooms. So 1 bed for his girlfriend and him, 1 bed for me, and then the pull-out couch for the DJ. That was not the case at all. It was literally a motel room when we got there, very small, and I had to sleep on the floor because there was only 1 bed and a pull-out couch. And they didn't. And the way my mindset works is if you're the artist, if you're the talent, you should sleep the most comfortable. They didn't have that mindset at all. So I started seeing different kind of true colors from them 2 years after knowing all of them.
Right.
They had me sleep on this moldy floor. Like pretty much mold was right this far away to my head. And
for people listening, you're showing about a foot.
Yeah, about a foot. Yeah, thank you. And so I had slept in very uncomfortable situations like throughout my life, but for 2 years kind of sleeping comfortably and gaining a lot of success, this was very much an open, like a curtain call for me where I was like, this exactly how I felt with my dad. Life is not how it seems. You don't know people. You don't know their intentions. Things can just fail. Things can kind of decline. So I was sleeping on this moldy floor while everyone's sleeping comfortably on a pull-up couch and a bed. And I'm in the middle of the night, I'm seeing bugs crawl beside me. Like it was definitely the most uncomfortable sleep I've ever had. Wake up in the morning and it's showtime. And usually how most promoters do their work is they pay the artist or the manager a week before the event, and then they pay the other half of the deposit the night of the event. I didn't see any of that money at all. And I was asking my manager, like, are we getting paid? He said, yeah, I'm going to get it to you. I'm going to get it to you. And it's weird because he would do this to me throughout the past few years, but I didn't think anything about it because I was garnishing success and everything was coming into fruition. So I didn't really think anything that he was withholding money or doing anything snake-like behind closed doors. But I started to see that something was suspicious. And I'm not really getting anything. And I'm asking his girlfriend, and I feel like at the time, like I can now speak about this publicly because they're broken up, but she was heavily getting abused in the relationship throughout my experience with them. He was very verbally abusive and at sometimes physically abusive. So she would try to tell me like, oh, he's stealing money from you. Very, very quietly, like stealing money, like mumbling almost. Yeah. But I would never, like it was almost like stuff I experienced with my family where I saw things with my dad was happening in the music life now.
Right.
I'm being exposed little things, but I'm kind of too naive to really understand it. So we're talking, whatever, and he says, oh, like, don't tell him anything. We go to the show, and I'm nervous. I'm not at all prepared. I haven't rehearsed, and New York is one of the most toughest ever. Definitely scrutinized online that New York is a very difficult audience, and if you don't engage them, they are very rough.
Right.
They ended up liking me. I thank God, I thank the universe every day because they could have been very rough with me.
One of the beauties of technology is that sometimes it doesn't work. And on this podcast, this is a story of overcoming. Sometimes we have to overcome technology as well. All right, so after a quick technical break there, we're back. So Rashteen, so you're in New York. You do this performance. It turns out really well for you. New York enjoys you. What happens after that?
I was outside and I was meeting a bunch of fans, and I would never expect to have actually done a meet and greet outside New York City, but I did it. And talking to a bunch of people, and then two girls end up coming up to me, inviting me back to their hotel in Manhattan, which is about roughly half hour, 40 minutes away from where the venue was. So I get in a cab, I leave my phone, my wallet, everything with my manager at the venue. I get to this hotel. We had a good time. I thought we were going to hang out, order a pizza or something. They end up kicking me out. And I start to feel like a foreshadowing kind of pre-existing effect of what I felt in Orlando with my dad, where I'm walking around Manhattan alone in the middle of the night. I stumble upon a payphone. I call my manager. I say, listen, man, they kicked me out of the hotel. I need a way back to the venue. I didn't bring my wallet or anything with me. And he says, just to deal with it, that he's not going to help me pretty much. And it was really rough because I'm feeling all these emotions like I've been given up again, like being given up upon. And I'm feeling kind of all the past feelings that I felt where nothing is really sincere in life. There's no one you can trust. I felt like I was severely backstabbed. I end up calling another artist in the management who was like my big brother, rest in peace. He passed away about 2 years ago, I believe it is now. He had got a cab for me, picked me up. I get back to the venue. I'm yelling at everyone that I can yell at. My manager, his girlfriend, the DJ, the promoter, the owner of the venue. I'm yelling at everyone. And my manager pretty much gets me to calm down and says, listen, you need to be quiet. Just Juice, who was the headliner that booked me for the show, wants to do a song with you at his studio. So I go back to the hotel. I sleep on this uncomfortable floor again. The next morning, we set sail all the way to his very beautiful New York City recording studio. And the studio is co-owned by a record label, so like a CEO of this label. And I guess he also partly is the partner in ownership with the studio as well. And I do the song with him. Unfortunately, never released. But my Just Juice says to me, "Oh, hey man, the CEO or the executive gentleman in the office would like to talk to you and your manager." I said, sure, absolutely, that sounds great. My manager and I go into the office. He's an older gentleman, and he lays out this contract. It's a lot of money, and he starts educating me upon the fact that a contract, like offering, like a money offer on a contract, is like a credit card loan or like a loan. If you don't reach the pinnacle of your sales and make all the money back, you are in debt. So he's telling me that. He's telling me that they like the industry likes to take kind of artists or people with potential, with some talent or a lot of talent, and they like to create them as a puppet, put them in control. Like, this is the music you're gonna make, this is how you're gonna look. And I was not.
This is what that CEO guy's saying to you?
Yeah, and I'm not at all into it. I'm very uncomfortable. But all I was thinking about in the moment was I can buy my mom a house, or I can do this for my mom, or that was all that was going through my head.
How much was the contract, if you don't mind me asking?
It was, I believe it was 6 figures.
Right.
If I remember correctly, so $600K, and that's a lot of debt to have if the sales don't reach its full potential. So, and then the last thing he tells me is, he says, the only thing that can make this contract go through is if I performed oral sex on it. And I looked in disgust. I grabbed the contract, I ripped it up, and I walked out.
So you go to New York, you do this huge gig that you've been, dreaming of for so long. You end up getting stuck alone in Manhattan, totally like ditched by your manager. You come back, they still make you sleep on the moldy motel floor after all of that. They take you to this place. They present you with a contract, really enticing with a lot of money there. And then this old guy's like, yeah, and if you want this, you have to suck me off.
Exactly. And I don't
What?
know who I don't know who he thinks he's talking to, but that's not how I conduct business. So
Right.
ripped up the contract. I told him to go F himself. I'm walking out, my manager's saying to me, "Oh, like why didn't you just do it? We could have been millionaires." And I said, "Why don't you do it then?" And I walked out and I started to realize that this is the industry. Obviously a lot of parts to the industry that are good, but there's a lot of parts that are bad and almost, I guess you could say, satanic and not comfortable, I guess you could say.
Right.
And a lot of abuse goes on in the industry, a lot of mind control. So I'm starting to realize all this. We fly back home and I start to think like, this isn't for me. I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to be in a label anymore. I don't want to be in a management. Honestly, I had a lot of thoughts about not even being in a spotlight atmosphere anymore. Like maybe I should do things behind the scenes. Maybe I should have my own management and not put artists through this kind of stuff. So anyways, we fly back. The first night we were back, I'm booked for an event and I ended up having like a pre-Kanye West moment where I'm like on stage and I was heavily intoxicated and I'm ranting about the things that I experienced, the things that are going on in the industry. My manager immediately gets two security guards to escort me off the stage. We go outside. My manager and I are arguing. We're yelling at each other. We're shoving each other. I'm spitting on his shoe. He's spitting on me. I don't even know where he spat. He spat somewhere on my shoulder. We're spewing different negative things at each other. And then he just said, "You're done. Like, I don't want you a part of my label anymore. You're done." He's like, I created you. He's saying that you were my product. I created you into the spotlight and I can take you out of it. I thought that was complete BS. I thought I created genuine relationships, but boy, was that ever true. 3-4 months go by in my apartment. I'm a mess. I'm not cleaning up after myself and nobody's calling me. No talent agents. I'm not getting offers to auditions or for shows. It's like I was a spotlight name to just being completely forgotten about.
Just like that.
Just like that. And my landlord was very nice to me. They wanted to like allow me to stay, even I wasn't paying rent for several months. Eventually, since I had signed a contract with them before, like our agreement is that if I don't have enough money to pay rent, they have the right to take stuff from me and sell it to make their rent. I was not completely aware of that. That was more of my manager's kind of agreement with them. So they're taking all my stuff that I've owned. They took the dog that I had. They took him to the Humane Society. I literally watched them take everything away. And to be honest, the most thing that hurt was just losing the dog. My car was impounded because I had 2 or 3 speeding tickets that were unpaid and lots of parking tickets. So that was in a lot. So I pretty much had a sweater, my phone charger, and I think I had $5 in my wallet. And I went to Union Station and I was thinking about calling my mom, getting her to pick me up, but I was too embarrassed. I had too much pride. I didn't want her to be disappointed. So I slept at Union Station for a couple days. I made friends with homeless people and they were all telling me, like, I met one gentleman that was a doctor and he had gotten cheated on and lost his wife, his kids, and now he was 20 years homeless at the Union Station. So I'm having all these amazing conversations, and then this one gentleman told me, eventually you're gonna start to go crazy because that's what happens when you're homeless. I think at that point it was like 2 days.
Mm.
I was sleeping. The next morning comes, and I saw someone that I went to high school with, and they said, "Oh, like, why are you here? You look like a bum." And they were quite mean to me in high school as well.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as they said that, that's when like a light switch went off in my head. I called my mom crying. I said, "You got to get me out of here. I've been on the floor at Union Station for pretty much borderline almost 3 days. Like, I need you to come get me." My mom comes and she gets my car out of the impound. We go to the Humane Society in Toronto. My dog was already given away to a family. A family had adopted him. So that was a big disappointment. And I came home and I was just depressed. And my mom kind of had to take care of me for a couple of weeks until I started getting back into jobs and stuff like that. Like, factory work, dishwasher. fast food jobs. I was working every job you could think of for those few months, all these different jobs. And then this is when I guess we hit the kind of more or less the final stage in the story. I had kidney stones one night. I didn't know they were kidney stones. I just felt a severe pain in my hip, and I felt like I couldn't breathe, and I wasn't able to go to the bathroom. I was in a panic state. My mom takes me to the emergency room, find out it was kidney stones. I passed them, and the doctor that asked me, says maybe we should do an ultrasound to make sure that there's nothing else, like no other kind of kidney stone fragments in there. We don't want it to come back. They discovered a tumor that was behind my heart in between my lungs. Huge panic at this point. My mom's freaking out. I'm freaking out. The doctor, I think he was a young doctor, like he had just gotten into the field, like just finished school. He was in a panic state as well, which is very unprofessional, but what are you going to do? Then for those next few months, it was just specialists. I had to see a specialist. 3-4 times a week. I had to do all these different types of examinations. At one point, they thought it was a malignant tumor, even without doing a lot of testing. And they were making me stay several nights in the hospital. And this was going on for like a good year, about 8 months, I'd say. And they finally say, "Oh, we want to do a test. We want to take a piece of it and examine it." They weren't even able to do that because it was so delicately placed behind my heart in between my lungs. So very major organs. So they're unable to actually go through it and actually do that examination. So they said the only option is we put you under and we just attempt to remove it. And they had this new technology where they were able to do it robotically.
Okay.
And they ended up getting it out, but it was like about a 4.5 hour, close to 5 hour surgery.
So did they just like open your chest up, like just right through the sternum, pull your ribs open and get in there?
They went through my hip,
Okay.
right hip, through my stomach, and then up through like more of like my diaphragm area, my chest area.
Gotcha.
And then they hooked around my heart, and then they got right in between my lungs.
And
So
how big was this tumor?
They said it was borderline the size of a basketball, and they were very shocked at how I was able to breathe and how I was able to function and still go and work out and still have all this energy and still be able to perform. And
Yeah.
so they were shocked, and they would tell me it's a miracle that I was still able to talk and function in everyday life. But they removed it. It was a success. Right after that, it was kind of like the same thing I felt with my dad. I said, I got to bounce back. I got to do something. And I was working at a gym at the time. I ended up quitting, and I took all my money that I had in my savings, and I flew to Nova Scotia, and I recorded an album called Stars. And then that was kind of like the bounce back. I was hoping to get some sort of publishing deal out of it. Nobody had interest. Everyone said that I was not marketable and that I wasn't able to do anything with. They weren't able to do anything with it. And at that point, I was still in the mindset where I thought like I didn't even know what kind of music I really wanted to make. So it was very like a positive, bittersweet moment where it's like I created great content, great body of work, but I wasn't getting the recognition for it.
Right.
And then I worked different jobs again, and then we met at a particular job as well. And pretty much along the lines of that, I just started realizing like I want to do it independent. And I guess this is where the story ends. And there's always another day to continue this as the story becomes much greater and I experience more in life. But I realized that I don't want to be controlled by someone. I think too many people in this world, they work for a top tier CEO that particularly doesn't give a shit about them, looks at them as a commodity, as a number. I don't want to be in that category. And I encourage everyone listening not to be a part of that category. Make the difference. Do what you want to do. Be your own boss in any way, shape, or form. If you have to get a job to make money, always have in that mindset that you have something greater for you and you have a bigger purpose. I realize that I want to be independent. I want to do it all on my own. I'd rather invest $10,000 into a video than have a management team invest $10,000 and not get my money out of it, or to be manipulated and not get what I deserve out of it. I want to be in complete control. And I think that is the most crucial thing in life. And that's how you find success. That's how you find happiness. And that's most importantly how you find progression. So the bottom line is I realized I want to be independent. I want to make the music I want to make. I want to look the way I want to look. I don't care if someone says I'm not a high executive person, says I'm not marketable, I'm unattractive, my music doesn't reach the masses because I'm not making the music that matches my image. I don't care about any of that anymore because I am my own boss. I am in control. I'm able to make the content I want to make. And even if I'm not at the particular level that I'm at now, I continuously in my mind tell myself that I will be at that level.
So what I'm hearing is that after all of that, that was a lot of, for lack of a better word, you just went through an absolute shitstorm. You got way up there. You got a taste of what it was like that you had been dreaming of. The rug was pulled from under your feet down to the point where everything was taken from you. Then you were diagnosed with this massive tumor in your chest that easily could have killed you. You come back from that. And is it fair of me to say that what you found was who you are and that everything you're doing now is to be true to that?
Absolutely. I think that's the most important thing out of the journey is realizing who you are. Because once you have that down, everything will just come into place. Yeah, I feel so.
Absolutely. And what incredible advice to be true to yourself. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for that. Now, my question, as always, to you, the person who's listening to this, what are you going to do in your life? Who are you? How are you going to go about finding that if you're not clear? And if you are clear and you're not being true to yourself, how are you going to change that? Reshteen, thank you so much for being here with us. Thank you for working through all the technical difficulties that we had. Much appreciated. The whole podcast is on overcoming, and today we definitely overcame that together. So thank you for being here. If people want to reach out to you, if they want to find your work, if they want to know more about you, where can they go?
Absolutely. All my social media is, I have my Facebook page is under @whoisScence. Scence, it's like science, but without the I. So SCENCE. It's the same thing on my Instagram as well, @whoisScence. My YouTube channel, I just actually put my first music video out that isn't under management. So it's my first video in about 4.5 years. I just released that on my YouTube channel as well.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. My YouTube channel is whoisScence TV. Yeah, those are all my social media links there. I guess the last thing I want to say, if you don't mind, is
sure.
Don't be afraid of what you're chasing. Don't be afraid of the reflection that you see in the mirror. Don't be afraid of anything. Come at everything like you are your own boss, that you are in control. Because the second that you're in control, that's the most important thing. And that's, like I said before, that's how you find progression. That's how you find happiness. That's how you find success. Just don't be afraid. Just run face first, no matter what comes at you at the other side. Because it might be ugly, it might be disgusting, it might be draining, but there's so much fantastic ways that the universe works and the universe tries to put things together. And once you find that kind of formula to how the universe works throughout all the ugly things that happen in life, you'll find beauty. So
what an amazing message. I think if everyone put that into practice, even just a little bit, the world would be an entirely different place. So much goodness would come from that.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you, Rashteen. I think we're definitely going to have to do a part 2 of this, seeing where you are in a few months from now. I'm really looking forward to it. I hope that you'll be back here with me. And I just want to say again, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me, man. I'm very proud of how much you've overcome, and I don't think anyone puts light on kind of your situation. You've gained a lot of success, so maybe one day we can swap places and I can do a podcast and you can be my guest, because your story is very incredible as well. So,
well, thank you very much. I really appreciate that, and you know what, I would totally be up for that. So as always, next week we will have another incredible story right here on the Mountains We Climb. Next week will actually be the first and hopefully only episode where it won't be live, but it will still be airing Saturday at 10 a.m. Okay, thank you so much, everyone, and talk to you soon.